we do start with a look at the U.S. Senate race. A new poll from the Detroit News this week puts Congressman Gary Peters ahead of Terry Lynn Land 44% to 35%. And the National Republican Senatorial Committee said this week it is pulling $850,000 worth of Land TV ads in the last weeks of the campaign. Taking a look at that impact now with Nolan Finley of the Detroit News and Stephen Henderson of the Detroit Free Press. Gentlemen, it's good to see you. You know, we're always talking about the election as we're now in these final weeks. But I think the poll that came out and the fact that that ad money has been pulled from Terry Lynn Land's campaign is a huge signal, Nolan.
Well, it's not good for a campaign. It's actually 1.1 million because they pulled cable TV advertising money too. So that was a big hit. You know, the race just stretched out on her, and money is going elsewhere. There are a lot of competitive Senate races across the country. There's been a calculation that they don't need Michigan to take the Senate. At one point, Michigan was thought to be the pivotal race, and so now they're going to put them, there's a lot of 1, 2, 3-point races out there, and that's where the money's going. I mean, it's bad for Terry because with the governor stretching out, you know, there might have been some coattails. You've got strong candidates below her on the statewide ballot. You might have encouraged a lot of straight ticket voting. Now you're going to have more split ticket voting. You know, she might have pulled this off with the right strategy and the right money in the last 3 weeks. All
right, let's talk a little bit still about the money, Stephen. So if you see this ad pull from this group, what does that signal to other people who have invested? Are we going to see more people possibly pulling their ads?
Well, I think you could see the Democrats also ease off advertising for Gary Peters if they don't feel like Terry Lynn Land will be up on the air in the last couple of weeks of the election. They have other races they might want to invest in. That Kentucky race is still very close.
It's tightening.
And there's some others that they may want to say, look, we have a better shot or a more important shot here than in Michigan, which everyone seems to now be looking at as sort of over. I'm not sure that's true, but certainly that's the calculation that they're making.
Yeah, you know, you never like to say anything is over with 4 weeks to go until Election Day, but what do you think has changed in the last week and a half or 2 weeks here, Nolan?
Well, I don't think it's over, and you know, she's got a challenge ahead. A lot can happen in the 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks until election. You know, there's a lot of movement generally in October. But she has still not told us who she is. She spent too much of her money, and those who are spending on her behalf spent way too much of their money telling us about Gary Peters. Well, Gary Peters start with a high dislike figure anyway. She didn't need to spend so much money tearing him down. She needed to spend more of her time, more of her energy on telling us who Terry Lynn Land was and why she's capable of being a senator. You notice that Peters' ads have switched to him. You know, these folksy ads, you know, like me. She never made that transition, and still in this latest crop of ads that are out there, it's attack, attack, attack. It's past time for her to make the switch. She's done all the damage she can do to Gary Peters and start talking about Terry Lynn Land.
What about some of larger campaign events that it feels like what we've been missing in this campaign?
It's been a sleeper campaign. I feel like all of the campaigns this season have been sort of at a lower level. I challenge anyone to tell me what's the big idea that's in the middle of any of these races. There isn't one. These are personality contests to an alarming extent, I think, and that race is the worst of them. It's not just that Terry Lynn Land is not telling you very much about who she is. Gary Peters' ads have also not been as much, and like you said, just in the last week or so, he's switched to these sort of folksy ads, trying to sort of identify himself. But he's somebody that voters know a little better than Terry Lynn. But neither of them is saying, here's the big thing that needs to be done, or that I believe. It's sort of amorphous still.
And I would disagree that voters know him a little better. That's what's surprising to me. Terry Lynn Land was well known.
She's run 2 statewide races,
as a very popular 2-time
Sure.
Secretary of State, and yet she has not talked about that record in the campaign. She's not reminded people, I did this, and this. I mean, she was a fairly independent.
Do you think that, I mean, this is one of the problems with her candidacy. What's relevant from her time in the Secretary of State's office in the U.S. Senate?
One of the things you might look at, and anybody coming to Congress is coming in from someplace else.
Sure.
But, I mean, she was a very independent Secretary of State, comparatively so.
She was.
She made John Engler angry on many occasions because she refused to use that office to sort of push a partisan edge, and she should talk about that. and she was very creative in creating opportunities for women employees while she was Secretary of State. She hasn't talked about that in these ads. I don't understand why she's not telling us who she is.
Well, and I think it's also interesting is that there's no debate either. And we've talked about this now numerous times about getting candidates to debate. And Channel 7, they just put something out saying, you know, all the negotiations fell through with both camps to have a Senate debate because they were in negotiations that with Wood TV also on the western side of the state. And I really think that that is such a loss for the voters of Michigan, the fact that you wouldn't see those two candidates up there talking about the issues or talking about their records and things that they have done that is perhaps relevant to the office they're running for an open U.S. Senate seat.
Well, I mean, and look at the conversation. It's this side wants this, the other side wants that, and they're both sort of pulling on the television station to accommodate, blaming the television station. This is the wrong. We've got the whole thing turned upside down. The candidates cannot be in charge of this process. As long as that's true, there will never be incentive for them to do the thing that they're supposed to do, which is show up at a debate that where there are neutral rules and format and face the other campaign. There will always be somebody whose calculation is that it's better to stay out of that format altogether. And that's why, you know, I feel like a broken record. I keep saying we have got to come up with an independent way to manage that process.
And, you know, after yapping about debates for the whole season, Gary Peters now got his heels in, backing off, because there's absolutely no reason for him to debate. You got a 9-point lead. You don't want to give your candidate, your competition, any opportunity to close that gap. I can't imagine him signing on to it.
And so it's, you know, it's seesaws, right?
It's a month too long.
At one point, it's Terry Lynn Land who seems to have no reason to debate. Now it seems like Gary Peters has no, and that's not the issue. The issue is that the voters deserve to see this.
It's the voters' reason for them to debate.
You know, I don't often talk about the press as sort of the voice of the people. I think there's some arrogation to that gets misused. But this is one of those instances where that role is really true, where a conglomeration of media organizations and some interest groups could speak on behalf of the voters and say, forget what these candidates want. We need to have a good debate between them about the issues.
$35 million spent so far on these campaigns, talking to the voters through television ads, through that distorted format, and neither one of them will sit down and say, here I am unfiltered.